We've got Labour's Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, on the programme. I'm not sure how much of that you managed to catch, but we just saw a film showing the impact of school closures on young people, many struggling to get the technology they need, anxiety, worry about not getting the grades they deserve. At what point do you think schools need to reopen?
Well, it was an incredibly powerful film. I did just hear it, and credit to those young people for speaking to you so candidly the way that they did. That is why we wanted to keep schools open as long as possible. Unfortunately, the Department of Education didn't take the steps necessary to keep them open for longer. But to hear young people describe how they still haven't got access to technology, haven't got access to broadband at this stage of the pandemic is inexcusable. Clearly, to answer your question directly, schools can only go back when the health factors are such that they allow them to go back. But there is no excuse for the government not acting to make sure people have technology and access to online learning at home, none whatsoever.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because looking forward, you say that schools can only go back when the health factors allow them to go back. My question, I guess, is what does that actually mean? I mean, Labour, you're in a position where you have been criticised, I guess, for calling for things that are going to happen anyway. This is a chance to kind of set out a roadmap. At what point do you think schools should be able to go back? What's your roadmap for that to happen?
It will depend on the rollout of the vaccination programme, it will depend on the infection rates in each area, and it will depend on the state of the NHS and whether it's on the brink of being overwhelmed, as it is in many parts of the country. There are things that the government can't control about the pandemic, but there is lots that they can control. And the response from government to situations like this, but also to what we're talking about on Monday in Parliament in terms of universal credit and the support given to people who have to be at home, who can't work, these are things the government can do. You can't get away from the fact that we have suffered in the UK the highest death toll in Europe and the biggest recession of any major economy. That comes down to how the government has responded to it. So they've got to be scrutinised for that, and how we get schools back will depend on how they take decisions now, like the one we're asking them to take tomorrow.
You mentioned there the decision on universal credit. I know it's something you're keen to talk about on your brief, of course. So in April, the £20 a week boost to universal credit is due to end. Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, wants to give families a £500 one-off payment instead. Is that enough?
No, I mean, I'm glad you've raised that, because that is, quite frankly, a terrible policy. First of all, if you go ahead with this cut, you are reducing out-of-work support unemployment benefits to their lowest real terms level since 1992 at a time when unemployment is about to peak. But of course, the reason a one-off payment is a bad policy is, whilst we're talking about 6 million families being affected, those families will change throughout the year. Some will go back into work, some will come out. We've had, at times of the pandemic, 200,000 new claimants coming onto the system in a single month. So a one-off payment, a snapshot, completely fails to support those people. There is simply no reason that this cut should take place in April. It's the wrong thing for families. I mean, £1,000 a year is like your gas, your electric, your broadband bill, all rolled in together. But it's also the wrong thing for the economy. That is £6 billion of spending being taken out of the economy at a time when we need it the most, frankly. So the priority for us is to secure the economy, protect the NHS, and then rebuild the country. And to do that, Parliament has to do the right thing tomorrow.
Conservative MPs, of course, are due to abstain on that. Opposition Day debate's non-binding. I guess my question as well to you is, Labour's position, as I understand it, is that universal credit should be scrapped. In the middle of a pandemic, is that the right priority still?
But when we talk about scrapping universal credit, that's about our priorities for the next Parliament and the election manifesto that we will stand on. There are huge problems with universal credit. It's not just Labour MPs who recognise that. People see the 5-week wait, the impact of the 2-child limit, the sanctions, the conditionality, the treatment of disabled people in the system, the treatment of childcare, which always has to be paid up front, yet universal credit is paid in arrears. I can't ignore those real problems. So I have to come up with a system much more comprehensive, much more effective than universal credit as it stands. And that's exactly what I intend to do. But for now, for what needs to happen this week and this year, there is a vote tomorrow in Parliament to cancel that cut of £1,000 a year for 6 million British families. There is no question that Parliament should do the right thing and vote to cancel that cut.
Are you talking to Conservatives about it? Are you expecting a rebellion there?
I can't predict what Conservative colleagues will do, but yes, people have been in touch. There's been some productive conversations. Look, when was the last government to cut out-of-work benefits in a major economic downturn? I think you have to go back to the Great Depression and the national government to find that. There is a reason this never happens. There is a reason it is not in the national interest. It is absolutely the wrong priority for the government to even be considering doing this. There shouldn't even be a vote on this tomorrow. The government should have made a decision on this a long time ago rather than wait till the last minute, as they always seem to do in the pandemic. Yes, lots of Conservative colleagues are equally worried about this, and I hope they will vote with how they really feel about this, and therefore Parliament will make the right decision.
I guess it's only right for me to put a bit of the Conservative perspective here, because we are talking about a fact that they've given a temporary boost to universal credit during the pandemic, and there is, of course, this £500 one-off payment instead too. Now, you've been very critical of the government on universal credit, on schools. At the same time, though, over 3.5 million first doses of the vaccine have been given out. That's more than any other European country. Is it time to hold your hands up and say, actually, you know what, on this, the government done a really good job?
Well, I've seen the vaccine rollout in my constituency, and it's brilliant to see. It's affirming. We want the vaccine rollout to succeed, and we want to be the first country to vaccinate all those vulnerable groups, and I think the whole country feels that way. The problem with the government is they like international comparisons on the things that they feel they're doing well on. When it comes to, tragically, the death toll or the impact on the economy, they're a bit more reticent about it. So they've got to understand that when we hold them to account, it's because we want the national strategy on this pandemic to succeed. We want to scrutinise them, not to score points against them, but to make the country's national response more effective. And if you think about this vote on universal credit and working tax credit tomorrow, clearly
we talked about
we will
that
be able
already.
to tackle this better if we make the right decision on it. So we've got to understand where we're coming from.
We've spoken a lot about the vote tomorrow, to be fair. Mr Reynolds, I am quite keen to talk about some other issues as well. The government's decided to tighten up border restrictions in light of these new variants. Now, we've all seen the images of Instagram influencers going on holiday, posting beach or poolside snaps. If you go on holiday right now, are you being selfish?
Sorry, I missed that last bit, Sophie, but I think you were talking about the restrictions on airports and travellers coming into the country. I just don't understand why it's taken so long to put those arrangements in place. We've seen what went on in other countries. I think we were told initially that those just weren't effective, they weren't worth doing, but clearly they are. So I don't understand why it's taken so long. And I think there is a significant degree of national concern about why we've been so slow to make sure our borders are secure and we're stopping new strains coming into the country.
Is there some personal responsibility too here, though, as well? Are you being selfish if you go on holiday now?
Well, it obviously depends the circumstances about which you are travelling. But yes, I mean, let's be clear, though. People have, in the main, throughout this pandemic, abided by some really tough restrictions. Yes, we all know some high-profile infringements that have taken place, but people have not seen family members. There have been students, away from home who haven't been able to go home and see their families. So let's not try and let the government get away with blaming the public or blaming people for their personal conduct for where the pandemic response has gone wrong. I think that lets them off the hook. The majority of British people have abided by really tough restrictions, and they've done it in the national interest, and they've done it whatever the personal cost to them has been, and we have to recognise that.
One thing that it does seem people are perhaps not always obeying the rules on is the quarantine or on self-isolating. Some of the surveys shown pretty low number of people who have been self-isolating for the full amount of time. Given that, do you think people should be put in hotels, quarantine hotels, like they do in other countries, if they return to the UK from abroad?
If that is the most effective way to tackle that, I'd look at that. I'm not sure necessarily it is the case. I mean, I think most people do abide by the restrictions, have been able to stay home. If there's a specific cohort, I have seen things that look like they may have worked quite successfully in other countries. So there's best practice there. But again, the problem is, Sophie, we're behind the curve on this. We haven't acted quickly enough. We haven't done what other countries have done. So there's plenty of things that we can learn from. But as I say, I think most people have abided by some tough restrictions, whatever the personal cost to them.